remember seeing in the paper recently, the last week where Frank Williamson died.
Yeah.
One of the women's office asked me if I knew him, and I said, that name's familiar, but I can't place him. She said his wife's name is Janella, and it still didn't ring a bell, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought about that, and I told her, I said, I remember a Larry Williamson. He married Ida Alice Sheffield, and he died rather young. Had a heart attack. And I got home and picked up the paper and started reading that. Most of it came to me. Of course I knew him. His father worked at Culpeper's, and they were members of our church. He had a younger sister named Virginia, and he had a brother named Billy that works at Culpeper's now. And then this Larry was in between that died, good many years ago. And Janella, of course, I knew Janella, and she works for the city. But I hadn't seen them in years. So, I just kind of...
I think of Janella, I think the one that works for Baytown Sun, has our column in the Baytown. Janella Boynton.
Oh, yeah. But...
I think I'll start out. This is an interview with Willadine Hines. And let's see, what's your address, Willadine?
803 North Jones.
803 North Jones in Baytown. And this is February the 11th, 1976. And I understand you've been a resident of Baytown quite a few years. What's the first address you can remember that your family lived at?
119 West Defeat.
Do you remember as the property now stands, is the property now still there?
Yes,
as it was?
It's still there.
Still there? But it's not in your family anymore?
No. We moved there in 1925 and lived there until, I think, about 35. 34 or 35, and my mother sold it to a group of doctors that turned it into the Baytown Hospital.
Oh, the Baytown Hospital.
The original Baytown Hospital.
Do you have any idea who owned it before your family did?
I don't know.
You don't know who they bought it from?
I don't know who. I don't guess I ever heard that.
Well, Earldine, when you first recalled, who'd your family consist of? I mean, how many members and who was living at that time? You remember?
My father was dead. That's why we moved to Baytown, and my mother, and I had an older sister and brother, and bachelor brother of my mother's lived with us.
What was your brothers and sisters' names?
My brother's name is Shirley J. Hines, and my sister's name is Amy Ruth.
Amy Ruth
Hines. Her name is.
And what was your mother's first name?
Nettie.
Nettie
Aldith Hines. Or Nettie Lyons Hines. Her maiden name was Lyons.
Was your mother a native Texan?
No.
Or was she from out of state?
She was a native of South Louisiana.
Do you know what the circumstances for when your father and mother married? Did they meet in Louisiana? Or?
Yes, my father worked in oil field, and the story goes that he saw her and was attracted.
Immediately.
Met her and dated her, and they married. And
was your father? Now, what was his full name?
His name was Will J. Hines.
Will J. Hines. And was he not a native of Texas, or was he out of state?
No, he was a native of Mississippi. He was born in Kosciuszko, Mississippi.
Kosciuszko, yes. That's in the up toward the Natchez Trace area.
Yes, kind of north. North central, maybe.
Do you remember? I guess he found himself in Louisiana in the oil business. I guess, man, that's how he got down.
Yes, he was working in the oil field there, and then he went to West Columbia. Well, they lived in Ged, which is
Probably not
it's
a
not
town.
really a town anymore. It's just the remnants of a community.
Do you remember what the wedding date for your mother and father when they were married? Do you ever recall your mother saying that?
No, I really don't.
But they were married in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall hearing your mother say anything about where her family came from? Like her mother and father.
Well, I think they were from South Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What about, had you ever heard your father say much about his family from Mississippi? Had they come to Mississippi?
His father came to Mississippi from Alabama.
Alabama.
And originally, so my aunt discovered in doing a genealogy survey that the Hineses came from, I believe she told me, Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather stayed in Mississippi. No, he first went to Louisiana and then back to Mississippi, and then he had a brother that settled in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you happen to recall how many brothers and sisters your daddy had?
My daddy had one brother and three sisters.
Did you ever know your grandparents on either side of your family?
I knew the grandparents on my mother's side.
What was their name?
My grandfather died the year after my father did.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really remember him too well, but my grandmother lived, I don't know what year she died, but she lived a while. But she was aged.
And she stayed in Louisiana, though?
And she lived here. They lived here in 19...
After y'all came?
18.
Before.
My mother's two bachelor brothers moved in here when they were working in the oil field.
Mm-hmm.
And they resided over on East Wright.
East Wright.
And they had a unmarried sister that kept house.
What was your grandmother's name?
Her maiden name?
Yeah, well, her name.
Her married name was Lyons.
Lyons.
And her
You
maiden
remember what
name
her
was Gill,
Yeah.
Ellen Gill.
Do you ever remember visiting her?
Yes.
You do?
I used to go from our house over there to visit. I don't know how often, but it seems like as well.
Do you think you could describe just your trip from your house on over to her house?
Well, the thing I remember about it most was there were asphalt streets.
Mm-hmm.
That was an asphalt street.
How would
like
you?
most kids, I was barefooted,
Yeah.
and the thing that I remember most is stumping my toe on that asphalt and having a sore toe and not being able to wear my shoes. And
What about the asphalt being hot in summer? You remember
well,
that?
it was hot, but you could get off on the side and not have to walk on
Do
it.
you remember? Supposedly, you just think back. Say you left your house. How would you have gone to your grandmother's?
I left my house on West Defee, and usually I went down the railroad track till I got to Wright Street, and then I would cut across and go down Wright Street.
Do you recall any buildings en route that are probably still standing that you remember? Significant buildings, I mean.
Well, not really, because the one I remember the most burned was that a couple of years ago, the old Oiler Theater that was a furniture storage place. And then there was a frame building across the street there on the corner that I don't really know what it was, an old bus station, I guess. And then all those buildings there were buildings on Main Street with their backs to the railroad.
Right. You're behind the main.
I was sort of behind them in the road. There's a double railroad track, and we would walk the center. And when we go to the east side of town, and we could go all the way to East Vale.
In other words, as I recall, the city myself you'd go across what Guff's, it's Guff Street now, wouldn't you?
No.
Would you cross that,
You
go over the railroad, or would
DP
you?
is on this, it's north of Gulf, and I lived right in the middle of the first block. And another reason we went down the railroad, I guess my mother approved of that because it kept us off the street. You know, it was just a pathway.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall just if you how busy the railroads were? Were there any trains much? I guess you didn't worry too much
not too
about
much.
that.
A train to Dayton, that was about all. My first train ride was from Goose Creek to Dayton.
That was quite a trip, wasn't it?
Quite a trip.
Now, do you recall the name of the railroad? Was it Missouri Pacific
Southern
or
Pacific.
Southern Pacific?
Then and now.
Do you remember? You don't happen to recall what you paid, do you?
I didn't pay anything.
No, it was a free ride.
A friend took me, and I'm sure she paid the fare, and I wouldn't.
Do you remember waiting in the depot for the train to come, or do you, any kind of in the circumstances?
I sort of remember being on the platform. I don't recall that I was in the depot. We lived so close, we knew.
You were used to trains, though, weren't you?
Yeah.
On the tracks. Can you remember, just thinking back to those days, can you remember what kind of cars? Did your family have a car?
My family didn't have a car.
Well, you didn't really need one too much in
my
town.
uncles did. They had to have a car, and the first one, I guess I really remember, was an old Model T that my mother's bachelor brother had, and he, at that time, worked in Barbers Hill, and sometimes, I don't know how old I was, but that was my first time to drive. He'd let me sit in his lap and steer the car, you know.
What do you recall, do you remember at that time, if you ever took a trip in his car, say to Barbers Hill or anything, did you go that way, or what kind of roads were they?
Oh, the roads were terrible. If we went back to Orangeville, where we came from here, that was just a sort of a major job. The roads were not good, and you had to go when it was dry, and
it's rough, bad weather.
You couldn't go very fast because the roads were bad.
Do you remember ever making the trip in a car to Houston in those days, in the car?
Yes.
How would you go?
Well, the bus station was, at that time, had moved from the corner, and later it was back there in more recent years. But it was sort of in the center of the block between Texas and D.C. And
it was just a short walk.
Mr. Greer owned it, and he had a touring car, and that was the bus to Houston. It had jump seats.
Would it be a regular schedule to go, or?
Yeah, they had a regular schedule, as I recall. And you'd have to go to somewhere about the bridge at 146. There was a ferry, and you'd go across the ferry. And
was that called the City Mall?
Then you traveled up by way of Highlands, which Highlands wasn't there then, and you turned.
How'd you get across that river at Highlands?
Well, that's what I'm fixing to tell you. We'd go up what is now to Barrett Station, and there was a pump station there. I don't remember what company. And you'd make a west turn on that. And it was somewhere in the vicinity of where old Highway 90 is now. But you'd go across the river there. And then later they built the bridge across St. Center River where we now know.
Yeah. But the bridge, that was the only bridge then, wasn't it? Kind of where old 90 probably was.
Yeah.
You recall anything?
And that was an all-day trip to Houston.
I just started to say you had to take you all day.
When you went to Houston, it was sort of an all-day. Well, in the first place, you had to, I imagine the schedule of the trip was such that people could do their shopping or take care of their business and then come back in the afternoon.
Do you recall anything where it went, where the
No.
Probably went downtown somewhere, I guess.
Well, it went downtown, but I don't know
where you got off or anything.
The first bus station I remember was the one over on the other side of Maine, and it was sort of where Old Market Square is now. That was the first one I remember.
at that time, do you recall if they had a train that went over there? Was that train that?
Oh yeah, they had trains.
Mm-hmm.
They had two train stations, and we had an interurban that was a Missouri Pacific line that left to here. Well, later, I don't know what year that was either, but left Baytown.
There was a few years, these few years
and
later.
went through Highlands and went to Houston.
And they had a bridge across the river there, I guess.
And I don't know where they crossed. I don't remember, but they did have a bridge.
But you made that trip?
A few times.
Mm. You recall how long it took you to go?
No, but not very often. We just didn't travel very much then. The adults went to Houston to take care of business, but
where would you, for instance, like at Christmas shopping, you like want to buy your Christmas present, did y'all just usually go right here in Baytown, or did you ever go over to Houston for that, or?
We didn't. We got one present, and I imagine my mother ordered them. Probably from Sears and Roebuck, or.
Oh, that reminds. Do you recall offhand the first time you ever went to the post office in Baytown? You remember where it was and the post office?
The post office, I believe, was on Texas when I recall.
Mm-hmm.
We had boxes. And I don't remember what our box number was. For a long time I did.
Mm-hmm.
See, it was a 2-digit number. And I remember where it was, and I mean the location in the post office.
You remember the postmaster's name?
No. The first postmaster I guess I really knew was Flo McElhaney, and she was postmistress, I believe, when this big post office was built.
I bet she'll know where it was. I bet she'll know where it is.
She probably.
She might.
Is that all?
No, it just keeps on getting.
Hey, Rich, where was the first post office you remember? Come in here.
On Texas? We'll be back with y'all.
On Texas, and we had a post office box that had 2 digits.
24. You remember
was it 16? It had a combination, no key.
And you had to move the little combination.
Yeah, it had a combination.
Do you remember, let's see, going back to, do you remember offhand what's your, the first grocery store you remember?
The first grocery store I remember that we traded, my mother had an account at Kelly's.
Kelly's.
Mm-hmm.
Where, you remember where it's located from your house?
It was located sort of in the middle of the block, probably about where that famous brand shoe store is on Texas Avenue.
On Texas Avenue.
And it seemed like it jiggled around. It moved, maybe.
Was it a pretty big store?
And later on, it moved down to in the 1 block west,
mm-hmm.
where probably the TSO is now.
Mm-hmm. If you could think back, say, to those days, first came to Baytown, and you walked down Texas Avenue, say from your house, say going west. Can you remember what would you be coming to first?
It was about 2 blocks long.
About 2 blocks?
About 2 blocks long. It was the first and second block were about the only ones that had any stores in it.
What would be a place? Would you be able to? Was there a drugstore in that area?
The drugstore was behind us, and it was Woods' drugstore.
And then there was
there was a bank on the corner. What was it? Security State Bank. It's where I don't know what's in that building now. They're on the corner of Asheville and Texas, and next to it was Woods Drugstore.
It'd be close to where.
Across the street
Penny's?
was Herring's drugstore, but
No, it's the other block from Penny's.
The block
in
down.
the first block, off of 100 block.
Did they have a picture show?
Yeah, we had the first
Didn't that
movie I
same-
remember going to was the Old Aura Theater, and they had silent movies. And then later on, the McKinstry's moved the theater around to Texas Avenue in the spot that is now, it was next to Culpeper, where old Culpeper's used to be.
Were there trees in the street?
No, you're too far down.
Too far down?
Second block.
It was in the second block, and on the corner was Guberman's. That's
was
now the Cage.
Was that a clothing
It
store?
was a clothing store, Guberman's.
General Merchant.
And above it was the Baytown Hospital until they bought our house and moved it around to 119 West Defeat. And then next to it was Culpeper's. And then next to that, I believe, was the Texan Theater. But it's been changed, so it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to say exactly
Well,
what spot.
Did they have?
They had a sweet shop, a little tiny
I was gonna say,
place
did they
that
have
was
a
called the
bakery and
Sweet
like
Shop,
that, or-
and then next to it was the movie.
Would it be would that sweet shop be things like bakery products and things
No,
like that,
it
or
was
just candy?
just kind of a candy store and a
store,
place where you
tobacco.
bought things to go to the movie, and
Oh.
they just called it a sweet shop.
Okay.
And I don't recall, we bought candy. Do you know what else they sold?
But before that, Orla Theater was on the corner of Commerce and DC.
Yeah.
It backed up to our apartment house.
Well, Bill remembers that. It
Oh.
burned about 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
it did.
It
I
was that
remember
old
that.
Yeah, that's what
furniture. Oh, and there
Oh, what
was
was there? A furniture store in
there
there?
was a cafe back there
it was. Eli.
that backed up to in the alley to our
Eli's.
Eli.
Eli Cafe. And then
Who
next
ran
to
that,
that
y'all
was
remember?
Kilpatrick's Hardware,
You remember who ran that Eli Cafe?
a
The
Greek.
Greek. The greasy spoon.
Because all the girls, a lot of them lived with
One time we
mothers.
went to my sister and brother and a cousin that's my sister's age went to church. We went to the First Baptist Church over on Texas Avenue, East Texas.
Is that
And-
across where 146 is?
No. It was
Oh,
about,
Maine, or Maine.
it was on the corner where now there's some offices. On the corner of East Texas and,
Would it be as
about
far as
Second
Forest or
Street.
Second?
About 2nd Street, and it was,
Is
Oh,
that
no.
as far down as it was?
uh-huh,
Seems
and it
so
was
far.
on, it was on the southeast corner of that block. And when we left our place to go to Sunday school and church, we would go out our back door and go down the alley to Commerce, and then go down to Texas Avenue, and then we'd come back that way. And when we came back from church one Sunday, my brother and sister and I all passed over a roll of bills, and my cousin saw it and picked it up and took it home, and she was told not to say anything about it, and we watched the paper to, see if
Mhm.
anybody had lost any money. And of course it was suspected that there was gambling going on,
That evil.
and probably somebody had
Because
dropped
the
it.
jitney stand was there on Commerce, jitneys we called them,
How much
That's-
money was
Jitney
in
was a
that?
tab,
Was it
wasn't it?
$80-something?
It just seemed like 62 or.
Well,
maybe
anyway,
it was
something
80.
There's a
like
lot of
that,
money anyway.
which
It seems
was
like
a
what
whole lot of money,
right in those days.
and nobody ever claimed it.
Would your cousin get to keep it? Or
Yeah.
are you share it with y'all? Or?
Oh, heavens, no. I'm sure she did. But anyway, we were
Y'all-
kind of
y'all
put
had
out that 3 of us walked over it.
Yeah, y'all had your chance. You walked out.
Yeah, and then she found it.
I
And
was-
also right back of our house was a store that belonged to Izzy Era, and it was a men's store.
And Bill's grocery store.
What about it? Did the
Bill's
Or
grocery.
was
Did-
that Kelly Williams or Bill?
Bill's.
Cause
Bill, we didn't trade there. We traded with Kelly's, and it was-
Man, we'd watch that garbage can and get us a banana. Well, you know it was
Sure, it
right.
was good, just a little bit overripe.
Well, now people pick them up in the grocery store for,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
We used to get,
a lot of good stuff.
We used to get that day-old bread, you know, from the Tasty Bakery.
We never did get any day-old bread, but we did get that half-spoiled fruit out and ate what was good.
I remember my uncle used to sell strawberries, you know, and he couldn't sell the what he called culls, so he let us have the culls. And they were just as good as anything. You know? Do y'all remember offhand what? Can you remember going to a silent film?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Comics.
Do you remember what happened when you went in? Did they have somebody play the piano for you?
Charlie Chaplin and
Did they have
comics.
somebody never play the piano or something like that, or was it
No,
silent?
we weren't that uptown.
Mhm.
It was just
It was a crappy
what we
theater.
used to do if we couldn't get the nickel required to go. Well, we'd walk along the sidewalk. The thing was built right, and it had air holes, you know, kind of at the feet, so they'd have air circulation of air in there. And of course, we'd go peep through those holes if nobody was sitting in those seats, and we couldn't, you know, we could see what was going on, and we'd do that sometimes.
And since it didn't have any noise anyways, all right, well,
Yeah.
just you still. Was it pretty exciting, you think? I guess it
And
was.
then when they moved around to Texas Avenue, well, our big thing of the week was going to the show on Friday night.
Did they have a
We'd
midnight?
go early, and they always had these serials, these continued things, you know, along with the movie.
Did you remember how long they lasted?
Oh, sometimes they'd have this on the weekends like that. They'd have 2 serials, wouldn't they? And a comedy, and then the show. We'd be gone 2 or 3 hours, I'm sure.
Y'all were right downtown, though, weren't you?
Boy, we had to stay in pretty well.
We didn't run the streets
Did
like
your-
some kids
yeah.
would.
Did your mother? I guess y'all had to check in with your mother a lot that when you're that close.
Yes.
Did she make sure y'all just went? Some of you went together. You know, much of them went together. I
We
guess.
went together when we were that young.
Did you say that you had the house y'all lived in? Did you say that your mother? What was there? Someone? It was an apartment house.
Well, my mother was untrained to make a living, and of course, women. There weren't too many jobs women could do then,
Right.
aside from being a waitress,
That's right.
and that wasn't considered very high class, and she
No.
didn't want to do that. So she could stay at home with us. We were all school kids. This brother, and she bought this place, and he lived with us. And our apartment was on the back, kind of like a lean-to shed, one story where we lived.
Right.
And the rest of it was 2-story, and we had rooms and apartments.
3-bed apartments.
We had
And
3
she was-
apartments, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One time we had 6 rooms.
Were these usually single people or married people?
Well, no, they were mostly married people.
Most married people. Were the people that
But
lived?
the ones that had the rooms were, mother tried to get men, but sometimes she had to take women to keep them rented, but she'd rather had men because they're easier to, you know, they're.
Did you remember ever having any trouble with the renters?
Oh yes, she did. She asked people to move.
How about paying the rent?
Well, there's still people in Baytown that
There
owe
are
us
people in the
money.
school system that owes us money.
And that's
That's right.
You know.
that's a shame. Hey, I guess they did have school teachers live there. I guess school teachers live there. Some of them.
Well, no, they later became, you know, their standard of living got higher, but they probably don't even remember they owe that money, but the people that they owe it to remember it.
Yeah, right.
You know, and it wasn't, now it wouldn't be, it's not considered a lot of money, but
But it was a
then
living
it was a
then,
lot, and
right.
my mother was a widow trying to feed 3 kids and raise them. and it was pretty.
You mean they would be obligated for the?
Well, sometimes they'd get without a job, and maybe right then they couldn't pay, but some years later they could have paid, but they forgot.
And they live there in the apartments.
Oh, she used to get up 4 o'clock in the morning to catch Mr. Pearson. You know, they'd come out early, you know, and go down the steps quiet. And she'd get up real early to try to get her rent, because he drove a taxi or a jitney.
And he had
And they went into the docks. They went everywhere, but they brought these guys out from the docks.
And
he got his money because they were. He had a franchise for going down to the what was then the Hummel docks. And those seamen had money when they hit port,
Sure
so
they
he
did.
got his money, and he'd even take them to Houston, you know, and pick them up. So he did pretty well.
And she was trying to get her rent from him.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
Why didn't she throw him out? I guess.
Oh, we used to
Well,
tell her
you-
she wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
When I
They
You-
got
got right down to it. She probably wouldn't.
When
do
I
it.
got up older, I used to want to go up there and get this stuff and throw it down from upstairs.
I know what you mean.
Of course, she knew law, wouldn't
And
She
he-
would get some along, but I'm sure it was then like it is now that some people think because it's a woman they might,
Take advantage of it.
you know, they might can get by.
she was easy going.
But
Well, she was just human. She hated seeing anybody out in the
Yeah.
cold, but still, they should have paid their rent. Because it cost her to have him there.
but anyway, she managed to feed us and raise us,
Wasn't in debt.
and wasn't in debt, and she paid her taxes, and when she died she didn't know anybody, and so she thought she'd done the right thing, and that's all that counts after all.
I think so too. And she had the responsibility of raising you when your father died, and she had that responsibility.
Well, some of the people in my generation that worked with me that lived other places during the Depression years that had fathers said that they went without meals, and we never did go without a meal, did we?
Oh, no, we had good meals.
We always
That was-
had food on our table.
That was good provision for her, because in that
Well, Mother
depression
was
area,
the manager. You know, we
She must have been a
didn't
good
have
manager.
roast. We might have tomato gravy and fried salt pork, and my
But she
uncles
didn't have
all raised the garden, so we all had you know, and they canned, so
And
She
they
had
had
a
a cow, or they'd go have a hog butcher,
Yeah.
you know, over at Crosby or somewhere.
well, I
one
went
time my uncle had a cow out in this area. You know, this was kind of way out of town, and he'd come out here to milk the cow out on about where I live now on North Jones.
And he had about 3 gardens down on Texas Avenue down there. He'd get his
When he
flowers
wasn't working,
from
he'd
Texas.
sell the stuff.
Now, as I understand, then there was no tri-cities as combined. So, in other words, Pelly was a town by itself, and Goose Creek was a town, and
Newtown.
Baytown was a town. Now, y'all actually live in Goose Creek, right?
Yeah.
So, do you recall any dealings that you ever had, say, any reason to go to Pelly or to Baytown? Did you have any reason to do that, or when y'all were growing
Well,
up?
I
or-
went to grammar school at what's now Anson Jones, and of course the kids from Pelly and Goose Creek went
Do
to
that?
school there, and the ones in Old Baytown, I guess they had a grammar school out there because the Humble Company
Uh-huh.
gave them the property, and they built what used to be was that San Jacinto? And then San Jacinto moved over by the Catholic Hospital. But anyway, the school was demolished. It's
No,
no
it was
longer.
right there on the Humble property.
Well, was it San
called-
Jacinto though?
No, I don't know what they call that school.
Is it the one that's rather by the docks now?
Yeah, they tore it down.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And but
Probably
anyway, we
Baytown
went to the
Elementary or
same
something.
grammar school, the kids in Pelly, and it was all the same school district, even then.
Mhm.
After it became a district, and I don't know when.
It was really a Goose Creek Independent School District
And
even before it was town.
And the high school was down there where Horace Mann is. You know, the first high school until they built Lee out, and then when they built it, and they built it out there on Goose Creek Stream, kind of between Baytown and Goose Creek and Pelly. It was sort of a central
Wait,
location.
now you mean Horseman down here on Pruitt?
Yes.
That was the high school?
The high school was there. That wasn't the high school.
It's up the
That
same
building is gone, but the high school was on that location. It was also a junior school too, I imagine. The whole
Probably combined, I imagine.
But it was Anson Jones and the high school, see, and that was grade school, and they might have had what we know is junior school now and part of Anson Jones.
Senior
Yeah,
high.
right.
But by the time I was of school age, I went to Anson Jones through the 4th grade, no, the 3rd grade. And when I was to go in the 4th grade, they built Lamar, and I transferred to Lamar.
And where was Lamar located?
Where was Lamar?
Uh-huh.
In the same location it is now on North Pruitt,
North Pruitt.
right back of my house, where I live now.
Oh,
Where Lila
oh,
was.
right there.
Of course, it's been added on to, but I was one of the first students in Lamar.
I didn't realize you.
Was it a brand new school then when you went there?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, it was.
I went the first year, and that, you know, kids, you hate to give up your friends.
Do you remember some of your classmates that
Oh,
went there?
yes. Some of them still live here.
Mm-hmm. That was a real new school, probably.
When I went to Robert E. Lee, I went like this.
And when we went to high
We
school,
stood
we
on
didn't have
Texas
rides.
Avenue and caught rides.
We went up down on Texas Avenue and stood on the corner and held out our thumb, and people picked us up.
Y'all were lazy. I used to walk.
Well, pretty
Everybody
far.
did this. It was real odd, and the public was educated to it.
Well, then they
It was
just picked you
perfectly
up.
safe because
That took the
about
place of
that
school
time,
buses, didn't it?
people were going to work at the refinery, so there was a lot of traffic,
Yeah.
and
Our
they would
mother
pick us
wouldn't have
up.
let us done it if it hadn't been the thing to do.
What about a?
But
well,
everybody
did it.
did it.
What about the weather conditions? When it kind of.
If it was raining, you had to wear your rain gear.
What about when class was out in the afternoon? How'd you get home?
We caught a ride, went out on the.
Was the shift? Did the shift in about the
Well, I
time?
don't know if it was shift change, but people, some of the kids' parents took them to and from school if they were lucky enough to have a car.
But not many people had cars.
Nuh-uh.
Because I remember that myself.
I recall only one person I know now. Her father worked at the plant, and there were 2 girls in the family, and they were the only kids at that time that I remember that sort of had the use of the family car. The rest of the kids got it on occasions.
You remember what those people's names were?
Yeah, their name's McClurg, was
That's right.
McClurg. And the 2 girls, the mother's still living, and the 2 girls still live in Baytown.
What are their names?
Well, the oldest one's name is Florine Thibodeau, and her sister's name is can't recall it.